Murder is politicizing it. We don't need politics right now. You know, I would note in New York, we saw a terror attack just this week with a truck. Evil is evil is evil.
Joining us now, Senator Chris Murphy. Senator Murphy, what's your response to Senator Cruz?
Well, Ted Cruz, Donald Trump, and Republicans were immediately talking about policy change in the wake of that attack in New York. It didn't take Donald Trump more than a couple hours before he was telling us that we needed to change our immigration laws in order to protect our country. So there is a pretty tremendous double standard when it comes to the ability to talk about policy change in the wake of these attacks. If you're an immigrant who attacks Americans, then we talk about policy change. If you're born here in the United States, it doesn't seem that we're allowed to talk about how we make our country safer. The fact of the matter is, as you know, well, these epic scale mass shootings are the ones that capture the nation's attention. There is, on average, a mass shooting every single day in this country. There are 90 people who lose their lives from guns every single day. And so if this rule applied that Ted Cruz is trying to tell us about, that you can't talk about policy change the day after a mass shooting, then you could never talk about policy change in this country. It's absurd.
And everyone is in favor of some form of gun control. Ted Cruz agrees that machine guns should be banned, for example, and that you know, not everyone should be able to just go out and buy anti-aircraft weapons. And so the gun control is not even a philosophical difference between the parties. It's what do you do within the possible regulations and restrictions. What do you restrict and what should you restrict? What do you think the guiding principle of that should be?
Well, we're talking about weapons, these AR-15s, that were designed for the military, designed to kill as many people as quickly as possible. It's not that these weapons just look different. They operate differently. The bullets coming out of the barrel travel sometimes at 3 times the speed of bullets that are coming out of a common pistol. That does something to the inside of your body that is fundamentally different when it hits you. It's the reason why not a single child in that school in Sandy Hook survived. And so it seems to me that for these guns that are designed to kill, that are designed for the military, they should stay in the military's hands. And you are right. We have always accepted common sense limitations. And we have always accepted that the idea behind these laws is not to completely guarantee that every single murder will be prevented by a piece of legislation. It's to reduce harm. Mitch McConnell and Ted Cruz try to set up a standard for legislation, which we don't hold any other areas of law to. If you pass these common sense restrictions, background checks, bans on assault weapons, you would dramatically reduce the number of people who are killed by guns. And
what about that Republican argument that you always keep coming up against, which is you just mentioned it, that if it's not perfect, if you do something where it doesn't prevent every one of these problems, why try to prevent any of them? When you talk to your colleagues and they're not on the Senate floor and they're not in the hearing room and they don't have microphones in front of them, what is their real feeling about that?
Well, so, you know, half of the Republicans, I would say, you know, are real radicals on this issue. They really are, you know, gun control Darwinists. They essentially believe that if you flood the country with guns, eventually the good guys will shoot the bad guys. But the other half of them do understand what the data tells you irrefutably, that in states and jurisdictions that make sure that criminals don't get guns, that people with serious mental illness don't get guns, there's lower rates of gun crime. They're just not willing to move in that direction because they're afraid of the gun lobby, which is why I just keep on telling people we are engaged in a long-term social change movement. We have to become as strong as the gun lobby. That won't happen next year or the year after, but 5 years from now will cause these Republicans who are voting against 90% of their constituents to pay a price at the polls, but that's what it's going to take.
And how do you get to there?
Well, you get to there by making sure that people stick with this movement. Now, when I travel the country supporting candidates that are in favor of background checks, I now see more and more volunteers coming down to headquarters that are motivated by this issue than ever before. The groups that work on this issue have more money to spend in races than ever before. And so in 2016, one of the silver linings is that the races where the anti-gun violence movement was spending money and pushing volunteers years, we won the majority of the races that we played in. We just only had the resources to compete in about half as many races as the gun lobby did. We'll get stronger year after year, but we need to make sure that people don't get discouraged, that they understand that, like many of these other major social change movements, there are failures, lots of them, before you achieve success.
Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it, Senator.
Thanks.